Hello everybody and welcome to the 97th edition of the Frank and Stan Chat, and I'm delighted to say we have Mike Cladingbowl, a guest who was on probably about, must be nearly a year ago, Mike, I think, I'm not quite sure, but it's great to have you back. So how are you this morning, Mike?
I'm very well, thank you. Yeah, I'm joining you from home this morning, unusually, and it's sunny in North Shropshire.
Yeah, it's certainly sunny here. A bit cold though. That's the only thing. We had a bit of snow this morning. But anyway, Stan, how are you?
I'm fine, thank you. Worried yesterday when we had to go to York, and the morning started with the motorways closed and snow, but it was a good run. It was a nice activity, and it's sunny again this morning. So.
Yeah. What were you doing in York, Stan?
Frank and I did a conference for Wakefield head teachers.
Yeah, there are 170 odd of them, and we were worried, weren't we, Stan? Because
terrified.
We did the Frank and Stan Chat live, and they were fantastic. And I put on record all thanks to Steve McMullen and Louise Lupton, and other colleagues who made it happen, and they were really welcoming. And it was great to work face to face with colleagues. But I did ask them, Mike, how many of you have not had COVID? And it was about 40% of the heads there had not had COVID, which I was astonished, because I've got sort of teachers and head teachers in our family, they've all had it, but it does seem to be that there are some that it doesn't want to strike, and others it wants to strike more than once. But anyway, Mike, for those who don't know you, who didn't see the previous broadcast, I mean, can you just explain who you are, what you do, perhaps how we met and what have you?
Sure. Yeah, Frank, I'm a teacher. That's been my trade for the last goodness knows how many years. I'm not going to tell you exactly. Quite a long time. I was an English teacher, worked in secondary schools mostly, in a variety of different contexts, but usually in schools that were located in areas of relative social disadvantage. So schools in challenging circumstances, that sort of thing. I was a head teacher, secondary school head teacher in a school in South Cheshire. And then I met Frank first as a new HMI. I think Frank had been in a year or so longer than I, and Frank worked in a different division. I worked in what was called the School Improvement Division in those days, and Frank worked in the division that checked on inspection quality. And as part of your induction, you had to get to know the work of other HMI and other divisions and so on. So Frank and I went, I think it was somewhere like the Lake District. I can't remember. It was. We're driving for a long time down some small roads.
But I have to say though, Mike, traveling with a colleague, I mean, for that length of time, but also I've written about this, the week or so that you'd spend in London quality assuring the reports, because at that stage every report had to be signed off, before it went up on the website. But actually, you gain so much from that intensive period of time just chatting to somebody, invariably about education, and that's the same experience we've had, Stan. Just having that time, yes, to share the knowledge that you've got.
Absolutely. One of the things that I remember emerging at is some of those first conversations that I was lucky enough to have with you, Frank. Was about things like inspection grading and scales and the role of HMI and local HMI and whether or not inspection reform was needed. And I think both of us saw through all sorts of reforms. I know you were closely involved, as was I, at various different stages. And a lot of those kind of conversations, as informal as they were, rather like today, helped to formulate some of the policies that ended up coming through. So the notion of short inspections of good schools, for example, began to be cooked up in those early days.
These tended to get cooked up, Mike, in that lift I seem to remember waiting for a lift at Ofsted HQ, and me meeting you, and we'd just sort of wait for the lift, and then I'd throw something at you, you throw something at me in terms of an idea, and then we'd often meet in the evening just to sort of chat it through. And we wanted more radical change, I think, than the organisation was ready for. Really, I think it's probably been the problem with my career in Ofsted all along. But anyway,
Yeah, I think.
What are you doing now, Mike? Though.
So I left Ofsted 5 or 6 years ago. I was looking after inspection in England, and went to come back to the chalk face. So having spent a number of years telling head teachers and others how to go about doing their job, I thought I better go and have a bash at doing it myself again.
Do you have any regrets?
I've been doing.
Any regrets?
No, none at all. No, I've loved every minute of it. It's and also on a personal note, it's enabled me to have a more rounded family life in lots of ways too, because my children are now in their teens and or late teens. So it's meant that over the last few years I've been able to see them and sharing them growing up, which has been the greatest joy of all.
I just before we move off this, I think it was that drove me out of Ofsted as well. I think I've come to terms with that. It wasn't so much anybody saying anything or doing anything. It was really just the isolation I felt as an individual away from the family in London probably most of the week, and it just became very tiresome. And I think also sort of just, I don't know whether I felt sort of depressed or whatever. I didn't feel that way, but I suspect looking back on it, I probably was a bit of a, reluctant. Sundays became very tense, really, because you're having to pack in the evening to get up early on the Monday to get down there, and then, it was all just eating into the normal sort of family life that I'd become used to. But anyway,
there's a problem when your best friend is a train.
Yeah, I used to know the ticket collectors by their first name, and they would say, "I haven't seen you for a couple of weeks" or whatever, But anyway, let's move on. So Stan,
sad life.
I know, honestly, but you become in this sort of like, you become in this sort of bubble, and you could, Anyway, Stan, what's caught your eye this week?
Right, not in the details of any of this, but the report on the maternity scandal in Shrewsbury. I was reading the outcomes of it, the main findings, and all of them trigger a link to psychological safety and culture. In other words, that people weren't reporting what they saw, or the culture wasn't to report what they saw when things were going wrong. And then a second culture was to cover up anything that did go wrong and was known about. And there was no reflecting on mistakes that had been made and learning from it. And the bit about psychological safety, that bit about being free and being able to say, look, I think you're making a mistake there, from somebody who's higher up the hierarchy than you, has been identified for, it must be going on for 10 years now. Effective teams need to have psychological safety within them so that people do feel safe to say, I don't think you're doing that well, or equally, I think you've done that very well, or I think I've made a mistake. Let's learn something from it. And all that is old stuff. And yet there's a culture, presumably until very recently, that was still not letting that happen. And I just wonder, taking it back to schools, how many schools still have a culture where it's not safe to criticize the leadership of the school?
Well, yeah, I mean, I know Mike's got to be careful here because of the role he has, whereas and I feel much freer to speak because I'm not employed by anybody directly. But actually, I think leaders need to demonstrate that themselves. The point you made about, well, actually, this didn't work out as well as I thought it was going to do, or whatever, that sense of, oh, I made a bit of a mistake there. I think nationally, we don't have that type of leadership at the moment.
No, but
so key leaders are not demonstrating that. People in the public eye need to demonstrate that as a sort of signal that actually this is the sort of leadership that we're after, that's more reflective.
Well, there's so many leadership programs that talk about team building and effective teams. And yet this was a 2-year project by Google to find out what made teams most effective. Where were the high performing teams? What did they have that other teams didn't have? And they looked at makeup of teams. They looked at whether the people had the same interests, whether they were academically equal, all those things. And none of them came anywhere close to psychological safety. In fact, originally, they put it down to everyone having a turn to say what they want in a meeting.
Right.
That's where they spotted it. The fact that the most effective teams, everyone felt they could contribute at a team meeting.
I was having a conversation with a colleague yesterday, actually, and it reminded me of something that they reminded me of something that I'd said to them not that long ago, and it was to do with self-doubt, and it was to do with this particular person asking themselves a question about, am I good enough to be a leader? Can I actually do it? And I remarked to him without really thinking, he reminded me of it, that I said, often it's the people who doubt themselves in that way and who are honest about that, who can make the best leaders. And I think that segues into it a little bit, doesn't it? Or it leans into your point a bit, Stan. Yeah. The people will flourish if you allow them to flourish, and part of flourishing is making mistakes. And I think that the best leaders that I've worked with, they've been some pretty impressive figures, including some chief inspectors and others. But they've always been prepared and tough enough and strong enough and big enough, really, to own it when actually it's not going quite well enough.
Yeah.
So I think that's something that I learned from far better leaders than I am early on in my career. And I think there's a broader point too around some of that. I'm thinking a little bit about the white paper and the green paper this week, and the kind of the great opportunities that it could bring if there was great honesty about what is working well and what isn't working well in our schools and more broadly, and a real willingness to tackle those things together, understanding we're not going to get it all right. And I suppose some of the obstacles to doing that, both at a school individual level, at places like the hospital down the road from where I live that you're talking about, Stan, is maybe the accountability system and kind of the high stakes cultures, and often some of those folk involved in accountabilities having different objectives. So we're not all shooting at the same target, and we're getting pulled in different ways. And wouldn't it be fantastic if, as a country, we could align ourselves together? All the great teachers, all the great heads, all the great folk who work across our sector could align themselves with the professional associations, with HMI, with Ofsted, maybe a slightly different kind of role, and government, to really put all of the resources and all our efforts behind finding local solutions to local issues so that the children do as well as they should do. And I fear that unless we do that, unless we find a way of sharing that objective and getting a sense of us doing it together, nothing's going to change very much. Right. We'll have a fractured system which will be punitive, it'll be too high stakes, and people won't be prepared to take the risks or to be honest enough to be able to admit they're struggling for us to find the solutions we need to find for our children so that more do better.
What's interesting,
bit of a long point there.
I think one of the things we spoke about yesterday was there's a great feeling when you meet with big groups of head teachers that's what they want to do, but the problem is the day job gets in the way of being able to say, why are we not having this great education debate? And I reminded the heads in Wakefield that Estelle Morris 7 years ago said to them, now's the time for you to take control of education. And they wanted to, and they were willing to, but actually, to get together as a group of school leaders is very difficult. And we've had 2 years where that's not been possible at all. And just looking at the heads, there was the ambition to do something like that, genuine ambition. but also a level of weariness.
Yeah.
And still in the background, as you say, Mike, that suggestion that, yeah, but if we take our eye off the ball in order to do something different, we could get clobbered by Ofsted, by some organisation that's going to measure us. And I do think, and I've said this several times on these, the number of heads I work with who said, oh yeah, we want to do this innovative stuff, but we'll wait till after Ofsted before we do it. Because for some reason that's a barrier.
It was interesting about how unique, I think what's been playing out here is at Shrewsbury, they've had 10 CEOs in the last 20 years. And actually I don't know the reasons why each of those CEOs left, but actually there was something in the report about the culture or the targets that they were being set around having sort of in effect natural births as opposed to births that have intervention, and those targets got in the way. They became a sort of they became the reason why things happened the way they did. And in a way, it's sort of that sort of corrosive approach that data, the wrong target, the emphasis on it, the overemphasis on that. We've got hundreds of, there's children have died. This is not about, oh, a kid can't read. This is about a child has died, a mother has died. And actually, I think the thing here around the stability of that leadership is essential, I think, in order to give that culture time to actually, because it might well be that a person who'd been there long enough may well have said, actually, I think that approach is wrong, but actually I'm not going to change that, so I'm off.
But there's also a learned culture, Frank, of getting rid of the leader, which is we know we got rid of the last one, we do the same things, and they'll soon be off and gone. Anybody who comes into an organisation to try and change it, if the culture is negative to that and strong, it's a very difficult thing to do, because there's learned behaviours that cause the leader a problem.
It was interesting. I had a chat with Steve Mumby this week, who's been doing some work in Australia with one of the states, looking at how their concern is around how indicators of failure, the softer indicators of failure. Not your academic elements, which normally can take years to really feed through, but what are the indicators that actually haven't got a good culture in your school, a learning culture, an improving culture? And they were saying things like, there's not enough attention being given to exit interviews from staff. There's not enough emphasis being given to staff absence and patterns that are emerging, and honest surveys being undertaken of staff views, and those getting their way right through to the board level, whereby your board CEOs are, not, in a way challenged, but let's have an explanation as to, let's be open about why is it like this,
But the person they ask, Frank, is the person who wants to cover it up.
Yeah, well,
that's the issue. Psychological safety would say that the person at the bottom of the thing could go and talk to the board and say, excuse me, but you might not know this is going on, but it is.
Yes.
And that's really a problem with large organisations, that the structure doesn't allow that process to actually happen.
I'm sort of wallowing in my feelings that in the co-op, we did appoint a head teacher and a member of staff as board members.
Yeah.
So there has to be, and in effect, that's something I know that certain political parties are trying to insist on that, in business generally, that there is that sort of opportunity for the voice to be heard. It might not be the majority voice, but it's a voice.
Is it too simplistic to say that certainly it feels to me as if there are two kinds of organisations emerging across the sector? Schools that are firmly focused on a particular set of outcomes, and everything, in the way that I was saying that we ought to be nationally, really, everything was being bent to that particular purpose, often characterized by a very standard desk instructions. This is how we do things around here, and there's little room for debate because somebody has already decided it's the best way of doing things, and that's how we're going to do it. And there are countless examples, I think, of schools and in the area that I work in now. So I'm currently now lucky enough to work with a family of schools. The Learning Alliance, quick plug, come and join us. We're great.
Yeah, particularly if you're a maintained school in the South in the Cheshire area.
Yeah, thanks, Frank. Good plug. Yeah, more of that anon. But there are schools who very much operate in that way, and trusts that very much operate in that way, aren't there? I still think there are lots of other trusts still, and lots of other schools that are trying to do things in ways that are more engaging and more inclusive, and that they recognise. And I think I said something like this earlier on, but I do think it's worth repeating, that if staff and if teachers and other staff who work in schools thrive, then so will children. And that as a kind of a strong and philosophical standpoint, I think helps to set the kind of culture that you're talking about. So, and the whole bit about the whole thing about admitting to failure and having a kind of a culture where people are afraid to speak out when things are not going well enough, where things that can be corrosive, where things can be toxic and so on. All of that's best avoided by people being honest. And people being open, because that way you're spreading the risk, and you haven't got single points of failure. You haven't got little disasters happening all over the place that nobody knows about. The disasters happening, we all know about it, and we can fix it, or at least we can have a pretty good shot at it. So that, and I do get a sense, I don't know if you do in your travels, but I do get a sense that those two positions are becoming more entrenched,
yes,
and
more distinct from each other.
Yeah, I'd agree, and I think there's also that's the case nationally with a view of what's the best way to do things, which I think the white paper, although it doesn't say we are going to eventually tell you all how to teach, that's kind of underlies it with an arm's length curriculum organisation, which, as I said yesterday, my boss used to say to me, arm's length means still connected to the body. But if we're going to have a government-funded curriculum organisation, isn't that the same as saying, well, we want the national curriculum, but we want it to be implemented in the way we think best? And that really worries me.
Well, I think there's a difference, in my mind at least, between the way things are done and what it is that needs to be done. And I remember over a number of years having conversations with various different people, including schools ministers and all the rest of it, over the delivery method. And certainly when I worked for Ofsted, and I think when I was in HMI, when Frank was, the line was very much that we're not going to tell you how to do it. That's for you to work out. The bit that I think that we would all benefit maybe from revisiting, though, is the content of what it is we want children to learn.
Yes.
And I think that the national curriculum is a good thing. I really do. I actually think it could be more detailed. I think it would save a lot of people an awful lot of hassle if we got the best minds in the country together and could identify what is it we really need children to know, understand and do in each of the different subject disciplines, whatever that looks like, and by whatever age. And let's just get that agreed, and then we can all do it. And that would make things like training, and it would make delivery much, much easier for everybody. And then what people could spend their time thinking about is not what to teach, but how to teach it best. And that, I think, is where you need that freedom, and where the bespoke things need to happen. But that's I'm a broken record on this.
I think
I'd welcome more central guidance on the content of the curriculum, locally adapted for sure, but more guidance on that, I think.
I think the thing that irks me most is when, I agree with that point, is when government tried to tell teachers how to teach, not what to teach, but how to teach. That's the thing that irks me, particularly around this particular things around behaviour, about policies. I mean, the mobile phone thing does my head in every time. I mean, that's just going to the point whereby you shouldn't be down that road. You know, that's something that schools need to resolve themselves. You know, and the behaviour issue is one that I think is very troublesome. Because the context is really important. You know, obviously we want children to be well behaved, but actually how you achieve that, that's different. I found that different in all of the schools I've taught in. You know, that the approach has never been the same, but actually it's always led to good behaviour. You know, so and I have to say, I visit a lot of schools. I do not see, you know, children, you know, out of lessons all the time, badly behaved. There's a high level of respect for teachers and for senior staff, and actually I just feel as though it runs away with itself. There's always failure in the system, and behaviour. This is probably why we need Ofsted at the end of the day. We need to identify where those broken records are, you know, or the issue that can't be resolved in a school. But actually, I do feel as though when they start to interfere with how to do it, that's where the problems occur for me.
Yeah, I think one interesting tension that keeps cropping up and has done for a number of years now is the relationship between academies, non-maintained schools, and the trusts that serve them or organise them, depending on the kind of trust you work for, I guess. And the autonomy that they enjoy actually under law, as well as practically. And there does seem to be a tension that hasn't quite been resolved yet between the central control and local autonomy and delivery. And I do think that's going to have to work its way through the system, and will do over the next few years. I just wanted to make a point though around the point you were making right at the start, Stan, about, you know, sometimes we get it wrong, and you know, and it's a really good thing to do, to say so. And I have to say, I was delighted to see that announcement about the National Tutoring Scheme, because when I read the white paper and the importance that was being placed on tutoring, it raised a number of questions in my mind. But then the following day, the announcement, I thought, and a brave announcement made by the Secretary of State, that the provider, the national provider, will no longer be doing it, and the money is going to be given to the schools, because schools are best placed in order to identify how tutoring will work best for individual children or groups of children. And that for me was a great example. And I know we all spend far too much time, or a lot of time, bashing governments of different colours and persuasions, but that was an example, I think, of somebody getting it absolutely right. So well done them, I thought, for that.
I agree.
I agree, but are you going to learn from it? Or is the next time there's money to go out, is it going to go out through an organisation? Or are they going to accept that actually the best way of distributing the money is to give it to the schools and let them go? On your autonomy one, Mike, I do agree, you know, a lot of the academy stuff was sold on the autonomy. But if you talk to head teachers in some trusts, they will say they have less autonomy now than they had before they became an academy.
And that goes back to the point Mike was making, though, isn't it, about these different types of trusts that you have. You know, that some yes, I think that's correct what you're saying there, Stan. But actually, at the end of the day, I was taken with the point Mike made about local accountability, about local control, and context being quite important in terms of making sense of all of this. You know, so I think it was really sad. Again, another own goal, I have to say, but in the white paper, the examples that were given were the usual suspects. So the case studies were all drawn from, I think I could list them all now. And actually that's a real shame, because I think we should be shining the light on approaches which are successful, but don't often get they don't often hit the headlines. They're just very successful approaches, but actually they don't have a sir or a dame leading their trust. You know, and actually,
when was the last time you saw a minister in a school that wasn't an academy?
well, yeah, well, I know that there is.
There aren't that many left now. Starting to visit.
There are up north.
Yeah, it's too far, Stan. It's too far to travel. I mean, wasn't it? I remember, Mike. There was a primary school very close to Ofsted's headquarters, which was the most visited school in the country, simply because you could walk there from the Ofsted headquarters. You know, so. Anyway, the point I was going to make, what's caught my eye this week, is around. I wrote a piece about cliff edge assessment, and I've been taken by the research that Professor Ruth Lupton's been doing in Manchester. I keep revisiting it because it came out in, I think, 2019. It got some coverage, but basically she analysed, what happens to those 30% of kids who don't get their maths and English grade 4, whatever it is. And she found that quite a few of them did really well. They got a suite of good grades, but not in English or maths. And it was really quite interesting when you look at those, the analysis of that. So you'd assume that a child who didn't get a grade 4 in maths actually wouldn't have got their science. You'd probably assume that. But that isn't the case. And so for me, it seems, I was just sort of thinking, we need to engage, we need to make productive the lower attaining young people. And by the system we have at the moment, doesn't really encourage them to remain involved, because it, in a way, as Ruth says, it labels them very, very quickly as not meeting the grade. And I real sort of, I want to mention a Blackpool and Fylde College who take some of those kids in lower sixth and actually get them their grade, which is fantastic, and that tells me something about when's the right time to assess that child in reaching the grade. So in effect, it makes me feel as though we've created this sort of cliff edge at year 11 and year 13. And actually, if you don't quite fit the model, then actually you really could be quite harmed by that, because in effect, it does affect how many opportunities or where you can go. So that's why I was quite appalled really about this idea that you're not going to get your student grant if you don't get this grade or that grade, because we're going to end up with some very, very bright, intelligent, ambitious, entrepreneurial people who probably do need to go to university, can't get there because of one bloody grade. So for me, cliff edge assessment, which is what we've created, I think could be quite harmful for those that are those that we need to ensure that we continue to engage with.
What about the opportunity? And this is just, I know this has been thought of before, of giving people sort of an escape route before. I'm not thinking children who don't get to level 4 or 5, but what about those that get there early? So you could write up, you could have, at 14, I got my level 5s GCSEs, and therefore they're now off, so I can concentrate now on other things in greater depth, because I've and we time our exams to when children are ready to take them.
It's Ken Robinson's thing, isn't it? It's the only system that puts all these children of a certain age in an egg box.
Yeah.
It just moves them through the production line.
Yeah, which makes it also very unfair for those that are born in September as opposed to August.
But also, because it made me think, Mike, what's happened to progress? Because this in effect is about progress, isn't it? That kids who start off with less than others, for whatever reason, the expectation is they've got to run a little bit quicker to get to the level where those that had more advantage. So it's harder for them.
I don't know if you remember, Frank.
Why can't we extend it a bit and just say, well, actually, why are we creating the cliff edge of falling off at year 11? Well, for some kids, it might be year 12, it might be year 13.
Yeah, I mean, Ofsted's definition of progress, for what it's worth, and really Ofsted's not the great definer of everything, and I'd be the last person to suggest that ought to be the case. But is that the progress is just about learning and remembering more as you go through the curriculum, rather than arriving at a particular point at a particular time. And again, talking, referring back really to my point about, can we not all try to line all our ducks up so we're all shooting at the same target and we've got a collective shoulder on a single wheel, rather than creating a whole bunch of separate and conflicting tensions in the system. I mean, that's another one of them for me, because what one definition of progress is, in Ofsted's perspective, is about children learning and remembering more. But then we've also got this, back to your cliff edge point, the notion that all children need to be at X by Y. And the difficulty is, as you say, is that all children have got different starting points. We all know that from having our own children, or for knowing children and young people. And that makes it doubly difficult again. It makes it doubly difficult if you've got a special educational need. It makes it doubly difficult if you've got previous low attainment. So I just think it's back to that question about, do we not need to have another big whole debate about what is it we want from schooling? And do we want all children to be the same? Do we want all of them to have a basic level of skills, knowledge and understanding? And the answer's got to be yes, hasn't it? But if that's the starting point, then let's work back and design a system that will get us there, rather than trying to design the system by putting in place a whole bunch of accountability measures, which is designed to force everybody to act in a particular way. It just seems a coercive approach, rather than everybody saying, hey,
it's a paper, you need to write this.
It's a what, sorry?
It's a paper you need to write.
Well,
I think you've got the passion for it, you've got the desire to do it.
Yeah,
I'd happily
we'll write the
wave
forward for you.
Yeah. One of these days, perhaps we'll get together and we can think about writing a book about some of this stuff. That would be fun, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
And Frank and I, just to let a small cat out of the bag, have already begun to have a conversation about some of that stuff. So
yeah, I think there is something. I mean, I think Mick Waters and Tim Brighouse, with their latest book, Improving Previous Best, they tried, and actually there's not enough. It's great that they've got that, and it would be great now to have that debate about some of the ideas they've put forward, but actually it falls into a sort of academic world, as if in a way it's going to be like the Times Education Commission, which is going to publish in June. That's going to be really quite radical what they're going to come up with. But actually, we need to sort of think about now about, well, how do we get the profession to engage in this and actually get government to understand that this is about our futures. We're not anti-government. We want to help the government. It's just, they need to reach out and to find a way in which they can embrace the sort of the profession more broadly. It was just my final thing on this was that this week there was something, I think the Sun said, there was something going, oh, that's right, there was some announcement over a number of hours working, the 32 and a half hours expectation. And the Sun said teacher unions at war with government over hours. And I thought, of all the words to use at the moment, this is not a war, is it? It's not at that level. This and in a way everything's sort of set up about, well, they're trying to do this. No, we're all trying and make it better for all of our kids. So my front door's just ringing now, which is the first time in all of these. So you two chat while I go and.
Well, it's interesting. Frank will remember, Stan, as I'm sure you do, that that thinking about what you say and when you say it, when you're a government or you're a big organisation, or even if you're a head teacher of a school somewhere, really matters. And it's always interesting to see what leads the news and how well that's being directed. And it did strike me as being interesting, and interesting is a euphemism for something, but it did strike me as being interesting that the thing that led the most, the thing that led the charge on the white paper was schools are going to have to teach longer school days. The implication being, at the moment, they don't actually do that. But when I looked at my own schools, most of them are teaching that already, or at least school days that long. And we're not, you're talking about 5 minutes somewhere, in terms of a short lunch time or whatever it is. So I think the choices that are being made when big policy announcements occur do help, do determine how they land with different people. And the fact that the Sun picked it up as a kind of lazy teachers need to get off their proverbial backside and do a bit more work for our children in schools, thank you very much, is may well have been intended. But if it was, or whether it was or not, it certainly didn't help the white paper to land very well in the staff rooms where they have them, and in the classrooms where they don't across England.
Yeah. Well, I think we said yesterday, we'll finish on this. So said yesterday, the deep respect we have for all of those head teachers in that room, that it's been absolutely awful the last couple of years, and the fact that they're still in there, still got the passion, still want to make it better for their children, despite COVID being rampant at the moment, well done to them. And it's, to me, it doesn't feel like the time to be slagging them off for not bending their back into it. They've been doing that,
and they'll rise to whatever the next challenge is, and they'll do it magnificently, I'm sure of that.
Okay, well, great chat again. Thank you. Sorry about it was the somebody delivering something. So it's the first time I've been an interruption. But anyway, Mike, it's great to see you again. And
you too, both.
Really enjoyed that.
It'd be lovely to have you on again. Be the first time for a third visit, but we'll look to that in the diary, perhaps for later in the year. And for everybody else, I'm pleased to say, it looks as though we're going to have a bit of a star guest on our 100th edition. So we're pulling out all the stops to try and get somebody who's been on before, and hopefully we are going to continue, Stan, aren't we? Beyond 100. I think there was a bit of debate. We're going to draw the line, but we're lined up now to the end of July. So certainly end up to the end of this academic year. But anyway, have a good week, Stan.
Yeah, I will.
And thank you, Mike, and enjoy your break wherever it is. Yeah, it was
a really interesting chat. I think there's a lot now I'm going to go and think about, but I am looking forward to your paper that says the world must stand up.
I don't quite remember agreeing to write one, Stan, but nevertheless, all right.
I think if you look back, there was a slight nod at that point. Good enough for me.
Captured on camera. See you guys.
Well, we'll see you all next week. Hopefully, all being well. Bye-bye.